My name is Naomi Sterling and I am 38 years old. Yesterday morning, under the overcast, weeping skies of Atlanta, I buried my husband of 12 years. Today, I sat in the center of the hypermodern glass atrium of Sterling Astrogenetics, where my 12-year-old son looked me dead in the eye, smiled with unfreezing, rehearsed coldness, and demanded I sign over my multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical corporation to him and fend for myself on the streets. I did not scream, I did not shed a single tear of betrayal. I did not beg him to remember the countless nights I spent nursing him through his childhood illnesses. I simply smiled back, a slow, deliberate curving of my lips that unsettled the arrogant adult standing directly behind him. Because when my ruthless, feared corporate lawyer walked into that atrium 3 minutes later, he did not just bring my ironclad legal defense. He brought a forensic medical file and a court-certified genetic analysis that he read out loud to the gathered press corps, permanently shattering their pristine high society facade into a million unfixable bloody pieces. Before I tell you how I dismantled the most arrogant family in Atlanta, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to annihilate toxic, manipulative family members who severely underestimated your worth. It had been less than 24 agonizing hours since DeAndre Sterling was laid to rest in a theatrical spectacle of Atlanta high society. The elite megachurch was packed to the brim with powerful politicians, wealthy corporate executives, and influential university alumni, all wearing their finest black designer suits and custom mourning hats. They were mourning the tragic, sudden loss of a man they considered the undisputed pinnacle of corporate excellence. DeAndre was always the golden boy of the Sterling family, a man who projected a curated image of flawless generational wealth, unmatched dignity, and profound scientific power. I played the part of the grieving, devastated widow. I wore the custom, heavy black lace veil, sat in the front pew with perfect posture, and graciously accepted the superficial condolences of powerful people who secretly looked down on me with intense disdain. I knew they whispered behind their glossy funeral programs about how the poor, uneducated girl from the dangerous Southside projects did not deserve to inherit the Sterling Astra biotech empire. What none of those wealthy, whispering elites knew was that the pharmaceutical empire they were all gossiping about did not legally belong to DeAndre. It never had now. The morning directly after the extravagant million-dollar burial, the conditioned air inside the ultra-modern glass atrium of Sterling Astrogenetics was freezing. I sat alone at the head of a custom-built polished titanium conference table. I was still dressed in my heavy morning black, wearing a sharp, impeccably tailored executive suit that commanded unquestionable respect. My posture was unyielding, my manicured hands rested on the cool, polished titanium surface. I was actively waiting for them, the toxic, entitled people who had spent the last 12 consecutive years treating me like a glorified, paid maid who had somehow maliciously tricked their precious, flawless son into a legally binding marriage. The heavy automated glass doors swung open. They did not politely knock, they never did. My arrogant mother-in-law, Vivian Sterling, marched into the high-security room, leading the hostile pack. Vivian was a manipulative woman obsessed with maintaining her elite social status. She was constantly wearing her signature heavy pearl necklaces and displaying her exclusive sorority pin like a badge of royal authority. Following closely behind her was my bitter sister-in-law, Chloe, clutching an expensive, rare Birkin bag like a heavy defensive shield. Beside Chloe walked her arrogant husband, Darius. Darius was an insecure, fundamentally weak man who relied on the Sterling family name to secure his prestigious place in the wealthy Atlanta social hierarchy, constantly wearing expensive Swiss watches that he could never actually afford on his own. But the specific person who broke my heart the most was the final, unexpected person to walk through those heavy glass doors. Trey, my 12-year-old son. He was the helpless infant boy DeAndre had brought home to our penthouse 12 years ago, claiming the child was the unfortunate result of a meaningless, regrettable one-night stand with an unstable woman who had abandoned him. Because DeAndre had convinced the world and his judgmental family that I was profoundly, biologically infertile, I was forced to swallow my pride and legally accept this child just to protect my husband's fragile masculine ego. I had raised Trey as my own beloved flesh and blood. I had stayed awake for countless agonizingly long nights, nursing him through terrifying, aggressive asthma attacks. I had held his tiny, trembling hand in sterile emergency rooms while DeAndre was out attending charity galas and drinking expensive scotch with his wealthy fraternity brothers. I had poured every single ounce of my deep maternal love into that young boy. Yet, as Trey walked into the titanium boardroom today, there was no trace of the sweet, vulnerable child I had raised. He did not run forward to comfort his grieving, devastated mother. He walked with the arrogant, aggressive swagger that Vivian had drilled into his young, impressionable mind. The four of them lacked any sign of genuine, profound grief for the man they had supposedly loved. Instead, they carried the smug, entitled, aggressive aura of victorious conquerors arriving to claim their financial spoils. Vivian marched straight up to the titanium table and threw a cheap, insulting cardboard box down right in front of my face. The loud, aggressive thud echoed off the glass walls. I looked down at it, my facial expression remaining neutral. I had the estate maid securely pack up your cheap, pathetic clothes from the luxury penthouse, Naomi, Vivian announced, her sharp voice dripping with unadulterated venom. It is time to stop pretending a pathetic girl from the dangerous Southside projects legally belongs in the Sterling family estate. You have played the grand, respected lady of the house for long enough. The expensive funeral is over, your fake, manipulative performance is done, and we are reclaiming what is rightfully. I did not flinch. I kept my cold, calculating eyes locked directly on her arrogant face. Vivian had spent years making sure I knew I was beneath her. At catered Thanksgiving dinners, she would loudly remind the extended elite family that I did not pledge the right, exclusive sorority. She would mock the fact that my struggling parents did not legally own any valuable property, and insist that DeAndre had performed an act of holy charity by simply putting a heavy diamond ring on my unworthy finger. Before I could even respond to Vivian's aggressive, insulting declaration, Trey stepped forward. The young boy I had loved unconditionally walked directly right past me. He slumped directly into the leather chairman's seat located on the opposite side of the long titanium table. He crossed his expensive designer sneakers and leaned back, looking at me with a practiced expression of unadulterated disdain. Now that the pathetic old man is gone, you will put the company in my legal name and fend for yourself, Trey said, delivering the vicious words with a cold, rehearsed, arrogant smirk. Grandma says you are not even my real biological mother anyway. You are just a temporary placeholder, so sign the heavy legal papers, hand over the corporate keys, and immediately get out of our building. The heavy, suffocating silence that followed his strict, entitled demand was profound. A normal, emotional mother might have broken down into violent sobbing. A normal, grieving widow might have screamed at the sheer disrespect and profound betrayal coming directly from her own beloved child just one single day after burying her husband. I felt a sharp, agonizing pang of severe sorrow in my chest for the sweet, vulnerable boy he used to be. But the powerful, calculating corporate executive I had become over the last 15 aggressive years did not shed a single tear. Instead, I deliberately reached for my heavy black coffee. I took a slow, methodical sip. I lowered the expensive ceramic cup, smiled warmly at the arrogant boy who had just viciously discarded me, and slid a sleek locked silver folder directly toward myself across the polished titanium table. Chloe stepped forward, misinterpreting my profound, calculating silence as complete submission. She leaned over the titanium table, trying to use her physical presence to intimidate me. Do not try to make a public scene, Naomi, Chloe said, her sharp tone laced with toxic condescension. DeAndre gave you the respected title of a wealthy Sterling wife. He elevated your pathetic life from the filthy gutter so you could sit with the wealthy alumni and attend our high society galas. You got to wear heavy designer clothes and play pretend for over a decade. Now you need to return the favor and step aside for his true royal bloodline. We are giving you a generous chance to leave with some basic dignity before things get ugly. I deliberately examined my perfect expensive manicure for a brief silent second before looking directly up at Chloe's arrogant face. True royal bloodline, I actively asked, my voice dangerously calm and steady. That is, profoundly rich, coming directly from a toxic family whose residential estate was quietly foreclosed on 10 embarrassing years ago. Chloe froze, her contoured eyes darted toward Vivian, sheer, unadulterated panic flashing across her expressive features. Or did you forget who paid off the ruthless Internal Revenue Service to keep your precious, incompetent father out of federal dangerous prison, Chloe? I continued, leaning forward just a precise, calculated fraction. Did you forget whose liquid money prevented your arrogant family from becoming the biggest, most publicized scandal in all of Atlanta? Because the untouchable elite Sterling wealth you are all so clinging to has been bankrupt for a decade. Every single charity gala you hosted, every exclusive country club fee you paid, every luxury European vacation you took was funded by the hated girl from the Southside Projects. Vivian slammed her manicured hand against the polished titanium table, her made-up face turning an ugly shade of aggressive crimson. "How dare you speak to us this disrespectful way?" Vivian shouted, her voice echoing off the expensive glass. "You are nothing but a fraudulent, aggressive gold-digging fraud." DeAndre built this biotempor from the solid ground up. He was the undisputed brilliant face of this advanced corporation. I just kept smiling. "That is the fabricated story you all love to tell yourselves, is it not?" I said softly, my voice devoid of any deep emotional warmth. Darius stepped forward, clearly trying to act like the alpha male of the tense room. He pointed an aggressive, shaking finger directly at my face, his insecure features twisted into an ugly, aggressive sneer. "Listen to me carefully," Darius demanded, trying to project an fake aura of corporate dominance. "It does not matter what false aggressive lies you try to spin right now. DeAndre was the owner of Sterling Astrogenetics, he was my respected brother-in-law, and he made sure his corporate legacy was protected. We possess the binding legal documents, the law is law." Darius reached into his tailored, expensive suit jacket, moving with an arrogant, aggressive swagger that he had undoubtedly practiced in his private mansion mirrors. He pulled out a thick leather-bound legal document and slapped it down right next to the cheap cardboard box Vivian had thrown at my face. "This is DeAndre's official, final last will and binding testament," Darius proudly announced, tapping the expensive leather cover with his heavy knuckles. "He signed it and it is fully legally notarized by the top legal minds in this aggressive city. He left 100% of this biotech corporation, the luxurious penthouse and all liquid financial assets to his true biological son, Trey, and since Trey is legally a vulnerable minor, Vivian has been officially named as his sole financial guardian. You are legally locked out, Naomi." Darius leaned forward, confident in his aggressive victory. "You have complete zero blood ties to this elite family, and you have zero legal standing in this corporate building. So, pick up your pathetic little box of cheap clothes and walk straight out the heavy front doors before I have security throw you out." I did not even glance at the expensive, bound leather document. I did not need to. I knew what it actually was, and I knew how worthless the expensive thick paper it was printed on actually was. I looked down at my expensive solid gold Cartier watch, checking the exact time with heavy precision. "Right on time," I murmured softly. Just as the cold words left my mouth, the heavy, secure automated glass doors of the corporate boardroom swung open with a forceful, heavy mechanical click. Every single arrogant head in the tense room turned toward the secure entrance. Vivian gasped, Chloe stumbled backward a complete full step, and Darius immediately dropped his aggressive, dominant posture. Standing in the heavy doorway was Elias Grant. He was my complete personal corporate attorney. He was an aggressive man, known throughout the elite city as a ruthless, terrifying legal shark who never lost a complex case and never took aggressive prisoners. He walked into the glass room, carrying a secure, heavy-locked metallic briefcase, his aggressive expression devoid of any fierce human emotion. The aggressive, fierce, real inheritance meeting was only just beginning, and the arrogant Sterling family had zero fierce idea that they had walked willingly straight into their own destruction. I watched their arrogant faces turn pale as Elias stepped fully into the heavy room. The fierce arrogance that had fueled their aggressive ambush was suddenly faltering. Vivian tried to maintain her fierce, regal megachurch matriarch posture, but the aggressive, slight tremor in her manicured hands betrayed her deep, aggressive panic. She had always relied on heavy intimidation to get her way. But heavy intimidation only works when the other person is actually afraid of you. I had stopped being afraid of the aggressive Sterling family a long time ago. Trey shifted uncomfortably in the leather chairman's seat. He looked from his arrogant grandmother directly to my cold face, perhaps sensing that the corporate victory he had been promised was not going to be as simple as they had claimed. He was just a vulnerable 12-year-old child, but he had chosen his aggressive side. He had chosen fierce greed over the dedicated woman who had mothered him. And in the aggressive, brutal corporate world of biological warfare and family betrayal, fierce, complete choices always have permanently devastating consequences. The air in the aggressive boardroom grew tense. Darius puffed out his chest, trying to block Elias from advancing directly toward the solid titanium table. But Elias did not even acknowledge his aggressive, pathetic presence. He walked directly right past Darius with the cold indifference of a man stepping around a minor, insignificant obstacle on the aggressive public sidewalk. He placed his secure locked metallic briefcase directly on top of the fake will Darius had just slammed down. This was the strict, precise, aggressive moment that everything would change forever. The lies they had built their aggressive lives upon were about to be systematically dismantled. I took one complete final sip of my heavy black coffee, savoring the bitter taste. The arrogant Sterling family thought they had arrived to claim a multi-billion-dollar biological empire. They did not realize they had arrived to attend their own financial and biological funeral. Let the biological corporate games begin. Elias Grant did not just simply enter a secure corporate room. He invaded it. He was a man who commanded gravity itself, dressed in a bespoke, custom charcoal suit that cost significantly more than Darius made in a full decade. His complete mere physical presence sucked the oxygen out of the glass boardroom. He closed the heavy high-security automated glass doors behind him with a fierce, deliberate, echoing mechanical click, sealing the arrogant Sterling family inside their own engineered inescapable trap. He did not rush, he did not acknowledge the frantic, nervous energy radiating from my arrogant in-laws. He simply walked directly toward the polished titanium table, his heavy, measured footsteps sounding like slow, heavy thunder on the pristine, polished marble floor. In his right hand he carried a gleaming metallic briefcase secured with advanced dual biometric titanium locks. Vivian immediately sensed the shift in power. Her tuned survival instincts, honed by decades of ruthlessly climbing the elite Atlanta high society's social ladder, kicked in. She straightened her spine, adjusted her heavy signature pearls, and stepped forward to intercept him. "I know who you are, Mr. Grant," Vivian announced, her voice echoing loudly in a desperate attempt to project corporate authority. "You are Naomi's expensive, hired legal help, but before you even think about opening that heavy metallic briefcase, you need to understand who you are dealing with. The complete Sterling name carries unquestionable legal and social weight in this elite city. We are untouchable. I play exclusive golf every single Sunday with Senior Judge Abernathy. I serve on the elite deacon board directly with the powerful district attorney. I have the influential mayor's personal, complete private cell phone number on my exclusive speed dial." She puffed out her chest, attempting to look physically imposing. "My elite family has been the cornerstone of the wealthy local elite for multiple generations. We fund the hospital pediatric wings, we sponsor the elite exclusive university galas. If you think you can walk in here and invalidate my perfect son's final dying wishes with some cheap legal trick, I will personally see to it that you are permanently disbarred. I will use my powerful political connections to ruin your corporate practice before the sun sets today." Elias did not even blink. He did not break his physical stride. He walked right straight directly past Vivian as if she were a transparent, insignificant ghost, leaving her standing there with her arrogant mouth hanging halfway open in complete shock. The psychological warfare had begun, and Elias was the undisputed Grand Master of the silent strike. He reached the complete end of the long titanium table, standing directly opposite Trey and the fraudulent, thick leather-bound fake legal will. Elias placed the heavy locked metallic briefcase directly on the polished titanium table. He did not look directly at Vivian. He did not look at Chloe, who was nervously twisting her heavy diamond wedding ring. He did not look at Darius, whose heavy insecure chest was still puffed out in a ridiculous display of false bravado. He simply pressed his heavy thumbs directly against the advanced dual biometric scanners on the heavy briefcase locks. The heavy latches sprang open with a sharp, satisfying heavy snap. Elias reached inside the heavy metallic briefcase and carefully withdrew a single thick document bound in a heavy blue legal backing. It was not a competing will, it was not a settlement offer. It was the original state-certified official articles of complete incorporation for Sterling Astra Genetics. He placed it carefully on the titanium table, smoothing out the heavy cover. He pulled out a secondary stack of classified financial disclosures, setting them right next to the first heavy document. "Look closely, Mr. Hayes," Elias instructed, his voice slicing through the dead silence. "Because I am only going to explain the reality of this corporate structure once." A projection screen descended from the ceiling. Elias clicked a silver remote control. This pharmaceutical empire was legally established by Naomi 2 full years before she ever met DeAndre. Elias explained. "As you can clearly read, she was the sole founder, the sole initial investor, and the sole managing member of this corporation. When she married your brother-in-law, they signed a comprehensive, ironclad prenuptial agreement that explicitly protected her premarital assets, including 100% equity in this corporation." Elias clicked the remote again. DeAndre Sterling held 0% equity in Sterling Astrogenetics. He possessed 0 voting shares, 0 controlling interest, and 0 legal authority to sell, transfer, or bequeath any portion of this company. You cannot legally pass down a multi-billion-dollar corporate kingdom that you are merely temporarily renting, Elias concluded, his voice ringing with devastating finality. Chloe staggered backward, her expensive designer stiletto heels catching on the pristine corporate carpet. She bumped into the sharp edge of a polished titanium side table, her contoured face draining of all color. But the industry magazine, Chloe stammered, her voice shaking. The prestigious Forbes article, the Elite Biotech Innovation Awards, he won CEO of the Year. We attended the banquet, we physically saw the heavy crystal plaques. He was the chief executive officer. I leaned forward, resting my elbows directly on the titanium table. The high-definition projector cast a sharp, harsh white glow directly across my calculating face. I looked past Chloe and locked my fierce, cold eyes dead onto Vivian. The older woman was gripping the sharp edge of her heavy leather chair, her manicured knuckles turning white. The arrogant aristocratic mask she wore so proudly was rapidly melting away, revealing the terrified, powerless woman she truly was beneath the designer labels and the exclusive sorority pins. It was all a curated illusion, Vivian, I said, my voice ringing out with devastating corporate clarity. DeAndre was a salaried employee, nothing more and nothing less. I gave him the prestigious chief executive officer title. I paid the retainer for the elite public relations team to get him on the coveted cover of Forbes, and I let him stand on those stages holding those meaningless awards. Why? Because your precious, fragile sterling pride could not handle a brilliant woman from the impoverished projects being the sole breadwinner. Vivian shook her styled head in frantic, complete denial, but I refused to let her look away from the devastating truth. You raised a coward with a fragile glass ego, I continued, my sharp words striking her like physical blows. When we first met, his so-called elite corporate investments were tanking. His generational trust fund was empty, he was drowning in insurmountable debt while trying to maintain the false facade of a wealthy Atlanta corporate prince. I bailed him out, I gave him an executive job, I let him play the powerful boss so that your arrogant high society friends at the exclusive country club would not laugh you out of the room. I gave him an empty vanity title so he could feel like a real man while I actually ran the global operations, secured the multi-billion-dollar biotech funding, and made the ruthless cold decisions that kept this empire afloat. I stood up slowly, pushing my heavy leather chair back. The expensive leather squeaked against the polished marble floor. I walked around to the side of the titanium table, making sure my complete physical presence commanded the room. He did not build this biotech company, Vivian. I did. Every single laboratory, every heavy corporate contract, every high-rise research building in our global portfolio exists because of my fierce sweat, my intelligence, and my ruthless strategy. I let him take the complete credit because it kept the peace in my strained marriage, and it kept your pathetic, grasping family off my heavy back. I leaned directly forward, but do not ever confuse a paid corporate mascot with the fierce, actual owner. He was my salaried employee, Vivian, and yesterday his employment contract officially expired. The sheer, complete brutality of the fierce truth hit the room like a devastating corporate shockwave. I watched the complete realization dawn on each of their arrogant faces. The financial fallout was instantaneous and Chloe began to hyperventilate. The polished, arrogant sister-in-law, who had just threatened me mere moments ago, was breaking down. Her chest heaved as she took short, panicked breaths. She dropped her expensive Birkin bag, the rare expensive leather slapping against the marble floor. Forgotten, her panicked mind was rapidly calculating the devastation. The luxury mansion she lived in, the expensive custom cars she drove, the elite private prep schools her arrogant children attended, they were all funded by a corporate allowance DeAndre had provided. An allowance that she now realized came directly from my fierce personal corporate bank accounts. Without DeAndre's executive salary, without his complete access to my fierce wealth, she and Darius had complete zero income. The foundational pillar of their luxurious elite lifestyle was a complete fabrication and fierce illusion that I had just permanently shattered. Darius looked physically ill. The aggressive dominant posturing he had used to intimidate Elias had vanished. He stared directly at the projection screen, his wide, unblinking eyes looking at the indisputable legal documents that proved his fierce brother-in-law was a complete fraud. He had worshipped DeAndre, treating him like a god among normal men, hoping to ride his bespoke coattails to endless corporate riches. Now he was staring directly at the fierce, harsh reality that he had been worshipping a complete powerless puppet. I stepped directly away from the white projector screen. My sharp, expensive heels rhythmically clicked against the polished marble floor. I reached into my tailored blazer and pulled out a stack of sleek black credit cards. I tossed them onto the titanium table. They scattered, sliding past the fraudulent will Darius had slapped down earlier. "Let us talk about the reality of your situation," I announced, my voice cutting through their shock with cold corporate precision. "For the last decade, this family has treated me like a bank with no transaction limits. You look down your noses at my South Side upbringing, while quietly leeching off the biotech empire I built with my bare hands. But as of 8 o'clock this morning, the Bank of Naomi is permanently closed." Chloe stared at the scattered credit cards, her eyes wide with mounting terror. She recognized the metal platinum cards immediately. She instinctively reached for her designer purse, her hands shaking. "Do not bother checking your wallet, Chloe," I said, maintaining my relentless pace. "That platinum card you used to book your luxury vacation to Cabo last week? Cancelled. The limitless corporate expense account you used to buy that Birkin bag you are clutching so tightly? Terminated. The monthly retainer DeAndre secretly funneled to your joint checking account to cover your mortgage payments? Blocked. And that elite boarding school tuition for Trey? Revoked as of 8 o'clock this morning. You and Darius are currently insolvent." Chloe let out a choked, desperate sob. She looked at Darius, her contoured face twisting in horror. "Darius, do something," she shrieked, slamming her hands against his chest. "Tell her she cannot do this. We have bills, we have the country club fees." Darius pushed her away, his face contorting with arrogant fury. He took a threatening step toward me. "You cannot just cut us off," he roared. "We are family. You are legally required to provide a transition period. I will sue you for everything you have. I will drag your name through every courtroom in Atlanta." I laughed softly. "You cannot afford a lawyer, Darius. You cannot even afford the gas in the car you drove here today." I turned to Elias. He did not say a word. He simply reached into his locked metal briefcase and retrieved a sleek, high-definition tablet. He activated the screen and slid it across the long titanium table directly toward Darius. "I suggest you take a close look at that screen before you make any more empty legal threats," I instructed. Darius glared at me, then looked down at the tablet. Vivian and Chloe immediately crowded around him. The screen showed a live high-resolution security feed from the VIP executive parking garage located 3 levels beneath our feet. The footage was crystal clear. 2 heavy-duty commercial tow trucks were currently blocking the exit lanes. Security guards in crisp black uniforms stood by, directing the operation. The first tow truck was actively hooking up a pristine brand-new Porsche 911. The second tow truck was already securing a custom Mercedes-Benz S-Class. Vivian let out a piercing shriek. "My car! What are they doing to my car?" Darius slammed his fists onto the table. "That is my Porsche," he screamed. "You cannot touch that. It is registered in my name." I leaned forward. "Call the police, Darius. Tell them someone is stealing your car, but before you dial, you might want to check the actual registration documents because those vehicles are not yours. They never were. Purchased by Sterling Astra Genetics, insured by Sterling Astra Genetics, and registered exclusively to Sterling Astra Genetics. I authorized the lease agreements as a professional courtesy to my husband. But since my husband is deceased, and since none of you work for me, those assets are being rightfully repossessed." Vivian stumbled backward, clutching her chest as if she were having a heart attack. The matriarch of the Sterling family was watching her kingdom burn to ashes. She had nothing left, no money, no power, no leverage, but Vivian was a survivor. When backed into a corner, a predator becomes dangerous. Vivian lunged forward. She grabbed Trey by the shoulders, her manicured nails digging sharply into his designer jacket. She dragged him around the table, pushing him to the front, positioning him directly between herself and me. "You listen to me, Naomi," Vivian shrieked. "You can cancel the credit cards. You can tow the cars, but you cannot change the law. Trey is DeAndre's biological child under state law even without a valid will. DeAndre's biological son is entitled to a portion of the marital estate and spousal assets. You owe this boy millions and I am his legal guardian. We are going to bleed you dry in probate court." Trey found a tiny scrap of his previous arrogance. He puffed out his small, trembling chest. "You still have to pay me," Trey sneered. "I am his real son. You are just the barren woman he had to settle for." The insult was designed to destroy me, echoing the cruel narrative DeAndre had forced me to bear for 12 years. My eyes turned to ice. I aimed my gaze directly at Vivian Elias, I said, my voice dropping to a commanding whisper. Open up the sealed medical file. Elias Grant reached into his metallic briefcase. He withdrew a thick manila envelope. A bright red stamp on the front read Confidential Medical Records. Elias broke the red wax seal on the envelope with his thumb. The loud tearing sound made Chloe jump. Elias extracted official hospital documents printed on watermarked paper. Mr. Hayes, Elias said, looking toward Darius, you invoked state laws. You bet your financial survival on the genetic legacy of DeAndre Sterling. So let us examine the true biological reality of the man you worshipped. Elias cleared his throat and began to read. Patient named DeAndre Marcus Sterling. Date of admission October 14, 20 years ago. The patient was admitted to the emergency trauma ward at age 20, following a severe laboratory complication involving high-level radiation exposure. Vivian let out a shaky breath. What are you reading? Elias ignored her. Following emergency surgical intervention, the patient was informed of the permanent and irreversible consequences of the trauma. A seminal analysis conducted 6 months post-operation and again 1 year later confirmed azoospermia. The medical consensus was unanimous. Due to the severe laboratory accident 20 years ago, DeAndre Sterling was 100% sterile. He was physically and biologically incapable of fathering a child. The glass atrium descended into paralyzing chaos. Darius staggered backward, his mouth hanging open in silent disbelief. He looked at the medical documents, then turned toward Trey, his eyes widening as the mathematical impossibility of the boy's existence finally registered in his brain. Lies, Vivian Zay screamed. It lied. You forged these medical records. My son was flawless. He brought Trey home from the hospital himself. He claimed his bloodline. These records were subpoenaed directly from the hospital archives, Elias said, his voice slicing through her hysterical screams. They bear official state medical seals. DeAndre Sterling signed the acknowledgement forms himself. He knew he was sterile 20 years ago, long before he ever met Naomi and long before he brought that boy into this house. Trey stood frozen near the chairman's seat. The 12-year-old boy who walked into the room demanding an empire now looked broken. He stared at me, his eyes wide and pleading, searching for some reassurance that his identity was not a lie. He discarded me, the woman who nurtured him, because he believed his blood made him superior. Now he realized he had no royal blood at all. I did not offer him any comfort. He traded a mother who loved him for a grandmother who only valued him as a genetic bank account. If DeAndre is not the father, Darius muttered, his voice barely a hoarse whisper. If he could not have kids, then where did the boy come from? That was the exact question I had asked myself months ago. I stood up slowly. I walked around the edge of the titanium table until I stood directly in front of Vivian. DeAndre was sterile, Vivian, I said, my voice dangerously low. He was a sterile, insecure coward who lied to you every single day of his life to keep you worshipping him. He never produced a single biological heir, so the million-dollar question is not whether Trey gets my money. The question is, whose bastard child have I been raising for 12 years? Elias Grant stepped forward, breaking the tense silence. He reached back into the metallic briefcase. He withdrew a crisp white envelope bearing the seal of an accredited independent genetic testing laboratory located in downtown Atlanta. This is a certified, court-admissible genetic analysis, Elias announced. Commissioned securely and confidentially by Naomi Sterling 3 months ago. You ordered a DNA test behind our back. Chloe shrieked. You have no right to do that. You are orchestrating this circus for one reason, Naomi. You want to dodge child support. You are framing a dead man to save your bank accounts. I looked at Chloe with a mixture of pity and utter disgust. I am not dodging anything, Chloe. I am cleansing my company of parasites. You want to talk about dodging responsibilities? Let us talk about the man who actually fathered the boy sitting next to you. I turned my attention to Elias. Read it, Elias. Read the results out loud so there is no confusion regarding the true bloodline of this family. Elias broke the seal. He withdrew a single heavy sheet of certified paper. The genetic testing facility conducted a comprehensive comparative analysis, Elias read, his voice steady and clinical. The primary objective was to establish the probability of biological paternity between the deceased subject, DeAndre Marcus Sterling, and the minor subject, Trey Sterling. The comparative DNA analysis from the minor Trey shows a 0.0% probability of biological relation to DeAndre Marcus Sterling. DeAndre Sterling is conclusively excluded as the biological father of the minor. A collective gasp ripped through the room. Vivian's legs finally gave out. She collapsed into a leather chair, covering her face with her trembling, manicured hands. The undeniable truth crashed down upon her. The boy she had spoiled held none of her genetics. He was a stranger. No, Chloe whispered, her voice broken. No, that is impossible. If DeAndre is not the father, then who is? Elias did not lower the document. He looked up from the paper, his sharp, predatory eyes scanning the room before locking dead onto the sweating, terrified face of my brother-in-law. Because Mrs. Sterling suspected deep financial and familial fraud, she requested a secondary cross-reference against another DNA sample secretly obtained from a discarded coffee cup within this building. Elias continued. Chloe frowned, her confusion warring with her panic. Whose DNA? Elias kept his eyes locked relentlessly onto Darius. The secondary analysis yielded a definitive, conclusive match. The genetic markers confirm paternity with certainty. The DNA sample from the minor tray shows a 99% biological match to Mr. Darius Hayes. The revelation hit the glass atrium like a runaway freight train. The sheer impossibility of the statement paralyzed everyone present. For 10 agonizing seconds, nobody blinked, nobody breathed. Slowly, like a machine operating on failing gears, Chloe turned her head to look at her husband. Darius was sweating profusely, large glistening drops rolled down his forehead. He took a staggering step backward. He grasped the polished metal handles of the heavy glass doors, shaking them, but Elias had engaged the magnetic security locks. Darius was trapped. Darius? Chloe whispered, her voice cracking. Tell me he is lying. Tell me that is not your child sitting in that chair. Darius opened his mouth, but only a dry, pathetic wheeze escaped his throat. His silence was the loudest confession imaginable. Let me save you the trouble of waiting for a coward to find his voice. Chloe, I announced, my tone razor sharp. Your picture-perfect marriage is a complete fraud. 12 years ago your husband could not keep his hands to himself. Darius was running around the city, relying on the Sterling family social standing to fund his secret life. He got his mistress, Cassandra Miller, pregnant, and when she threatened to go to the press, Darius ran to DeAndre begging for a bailout. Chloe swayed on her feet, clutching the edge of the titanium table. DeAndre knew that an illegitimate child would shatter the pristine illusion he had carefully constructed for your elite circles. I continued. To protect your flawless Atlanta family image, DeAndre orchestrated the ultimate cover-up. He paid Cassandra Miller a sum of hush money drawn from my corporate accounts to walk away forever. He took the baby, brought him into my home, and claimed Trey was his own biological mistake. He bought your husband's illegitimate child to save your precious reputation. He forced me to accept that child and bear the crushing societal shame of being the infertile, forgiving wife. He stole my right to motherhood to cover his tracks. Chloe's breath hitched, a strange high-pitched sound escaped her throat. She looked at Darius, her eyes wide, wild and unhinged. You let her raise your bastard. Chloe shrieked. You sat at her table and let my brother pay for your filthy mistakes. Chloe lunged. She launched her body across the space. She screamed with feral intensity, her manicured hands transforming into claws as she raked them across his face. Darius stumbled backward against the locked glass doors, trying to push his deranged wife away. Get off me, Darius yelled, blood welling up from the deep scratches on his cheek. Chloe spun around, locking onto a heavy titanium corporate award resting on a side table. She grabbed the heavy metal vessel, ignoring her designer dress. I will kill you, Chloe roared, hurling the heavy titanium award directly at his head. The award shattered against the reinforced glass door just inches from his face. Darius covered his bleeding face, dropping to his knees in terror. The perfect, untouchable Sterling Hayes family was, beautifully self-destructing right in front of my eyes. Naomi, Chloe demanded, her voice shaking but still laced with that familiar demanding tone as she turned to me. You have to fix this. Give him a settlement and make him sign a non-disclosure agreement. Write the check and make this scandal disappear. I let out a sharp, mocking laugh. Your husband, your mess, Chloe, I scoffed. I am not here to write hush-money checks to cover up the sins of your cheating husband. You will not get another single dime from me. Trey scrambled away from the leather chairman's seat. He abandoned the fraudulent will and the fake empire it represented. He rushed toward me, his face bathed in desperate tears. Mom, please, Trey begged, grabbing my arm. I am so sorry, forgive me. I looked down at the 12-year-old boy. I gently but firmly peeled his hands off the fabric of my custom designer suit. I stepped back, severing the physical connection between us. I loved you with every fiber of my being, Trey, I said, keeping my voice steady. But today you made your choice. You walked into this boardroom and chose their greed over my love. You decided that carrying a fraudulent last name made you superior to the woman who actually raised you. I turned my full lethal attention toward Darius, who was bleeding on the floor. Congratulations, Darius, I announced, my voice ringing with cold authority. You finally get to claim your son. You no longer have to pretend to be the fun uncle. You get to be the proud father you always secretly wanted to be. Since his trust fund, elite tuition, and healthcare are officially cut off, you can figure out how to raise him on a zero budget. Welcome to fatherhood, Darius. Elias pressed a button on a small radio transmitter. The magnetic locks on the heavy glass doors disengaged with a loud click. A dozen trained private corporate security guards swarmed into the glass atrium, their boots echoing sharply against the marble floor. They grabbed Darius, Chloe, and Vivian, dragging them toward the service elevators. The Sterling Empire had been dismantled in mere minutes. Real, true power does not come from a stolen last name or a fake legacy. It comes from deep financial independence and the courage to walk away and build your own fortress. Thank you for watching and supporting this channel. The heavy glass doors of the atrium swung shut, abruptly cutting off the pathetic, frantic screams of my former in-laws as the private corporate security team physically dragged them toward the service elevators. The deafening silence that followed was a beautiful, profound testament to the destruction of the Sterling family's fraudulent legacy. The biotech empire was finally cleansed of its parasitic infection. But the corporate warfare was not over. The glass atrium was only the private battleground. The real war was about to be broadcast to the world. I turned to Elias Grant. He stood still, his charcoal suit unwrinkled, holding the metallic briefcase at his side. He gave me a single respectful nod. The press corps is waiting in the main auditorium. Mrs. Sterling, Elias informed me, his deep baritone voice calm and measured. The global financial networks are live. CNBC, Bloomberg, and the Wall Street Journal have all dispatched their senior corporate correspondents. The sudden death of the supposed CEO of Sterling AstraZeneca has caused significant market volatility in the European and Asian trading sessions. They are expecting a statement regarding the succession of power and the future of the multi-billion-dollar research pipelines. There is no succession of power, Elias, I replied, smoothing the lapels of my tailored black executive suit. There is only an anticipated return to the truth. I walked out of the glass atrium, my heels clicking sharply against the polished marble corridors of my own building. I bypassed the standard executive elevators and took my private biometric-secured lift down to the ground floor auditorium. When the silver doors opened, the blinding flash of hundreds of camera lenses instantly flooded the corridor. The low, anxious murmur of the international press corps grew into a deafening roar as I stepped onto the elevated podium. I did not stand behind the podium like a grieving widow. I stood beside it, projecting unquestionable dominance. I looked out over the sea of journalists, investors, and corporate analysts. The room slowly fell into a tense, expectant silence. Good morning, I announced, my voice amplified by the state-of-the-art acoustics of the auditorium. As many of you know, my husband DeAndre Sterling passed away unexpectedly earlier this week. The global markets have reacted with predictable panic, assuming that the visionary architect behind Sterling AstraZeneca has been lost, and that the company is now vulnerable to hostile takeovers and catastrophic instability. I paused, letting my sharp gaze sweep across the front row of elite journalists. The markets are incorrect, I stated, my voice echoing with lethal corporate precision. Because DeAndre Sterling was never the architect of this empire. He was a salaried employee, a public relations figurehead whom I personally installed to handle the superficial social obligations of this corporation. I am Naomi Sterling. I am the sole founder, the sole initial investor, and the sole managing member of Sterling AstraZeneca. I built this multi-billion-dollar biotech empire from the ground up, and I retain 100% equity and voting control. A shockwave of frantic murmurs rippled through the press corps. The senior correspondent from Bloomberg raised his hand, his face pale with shock. Mrs. Sterling, are you stating that the late DeAndre Sterling held zero equity in the company? What about the board of directors he chaired? The board of directors is an advisory panel, I answered, my tone razor sharp. And as of 8 o'clock this morning, I have officially dissolved that panel. Vivian Sterling and her elite country club cronies have been permanently terminated from all advisory positions. their corporate access revoked and their expense accounts frozen. Sterling Astrogenetics is no longer operating as a vanity project for a fraudulent Atlanta socialite family. The cameras flashed, capturing the exact moment the Sterling legacy was publicly executed on live global television. Furthermore, I continued, projecting my voice to ensure the cameras caught every single syllable of my victory. My legal team, led by Elias Grant, has officially filed civil litigation against Darius Hayes for severe corporate espionage, gross financial negligence, and systemic embezzlement of corporate research funds. The myth of the flawless Sterling family is officially dead. The reality is that this corporation is stronger, leaner, and more positioned for global market dominance than ever before. I did not wait for further questions. I turned my back on the frantic, shouting journalists and walked off the stage. The execution was complete. The press would spend the next 6 months destroying whatever pathetic shreds of dignity Vivienne, Chloe, and Darius had left. 2 hours later, I was sitting in the plush, cream-colored seat of my private Gulfstream G650 jet. The aircraft was climbing rapidly through the heavy clouds above Atlanta, banking sharply toward the pristine, snow-capped Alps of Switzerland. I was flying to Geneva to personally oversee the acquisition of a European biotech research firm, a multi-billion-dollar deal I had meticulously orchestrated in the shadows while DeAndre was busy parading around charity galas. Elias sat across from me in the luxurious cabin, quietly reviewing complex international corporate contracts on his encrypted tablet. The silent, ruthless attorney had executed my legal strategy with flawless, terrifying precision. I reached for the crystal decanter resting on the polished mahogany console and poured myself a generous glass of exceptionally rare, 50-year-old single malt scotch. I held the heavy crystal glass up to the sunlight streaming through the cabin window, watching the amber liquid catch the bright, unfiltered light. I thought about the 12-year-old boy I had left crying in the glass atrium. The boy who had arrogantly demanded my empire, oblivious to the fact that his existence was a carefully constructed lie engineered by the cowardly men in his family. I had loved Trey, I had genuinely poured my soul into raising him, but in the brutal, unforgiving world of corporate empires and wealth, biological loyalty is a complete myth, and emotional vulnerability is a fatal liability. Trey had made his choice. He had chosen the toxic, arrogant illusion of the Sterling bloodline over the mother who had actually protected him. And now, he would have to learn how to survive in the harsh, unforgiving world without the financial safety net I had built for him. I took a slow, deliberate sip of the expensive scotch. The fierce, smoky burn sliding down my throat tasted like unquestionable freedom. The burden of the Sterling family's toxic, parasitic demands was finally lifted from my shoulders. I was no longer the humiliated, supposedly infertile wife forced to smile for the cameras. I was no longer the financial hostage of a weak, cowardly husband and his manipulative mother. I was Naomi Sterling. I was the undisputed queen of a multi-billion global empire. I had walked out of the impoverished Southside projects, built an insurmountable fortress of wealth and scientific power, and systematically annihilated every single person who had ever tried to tear me down. Real, true power does not come from a stolen last name, a fraudulent inheritance, or the pathetic, desperate approval of high society elites. Real power comes from self-reliance, cold strategic brilliance, and the ruthless courage to burn a toxic family tree straight down to its rotting roots. Thank you so much for watching and supporting this channel. If you have ever had to sever ties with a manipulative, parasitic family to protect your own peace and success, please share your powerful story in the comments section below. Stay strong, never let anyone underestimate your worth, and always remember that the best, most devastating revenge is unstoppable, uncompromising success. The flight to Geneva was smooth, the private jet cutting effortlessly through the night sky. I spent the hours going over the complex financial ledgers and research pipelines of the European biotech firm I was acquiring. It was a company that specialized in advanced genetic therapies, the exact kind of groundbreaking medical science that DeAndre could never even begin to comprehend. When the jet finally touched down at Geneva Airport, the morning sun was just beginning to break over the snow-capped mountains, casting a brilliant, blinding golden light over the pristine landscape. A sleek black executive car was waiting on the tarmac to take me directly to the corporate headquarters of the new acquisition. I stepped out of the car and looked up at the towering glass and steel structure. It was a beautiful, modern fortress of science and progress, and it was about to become the crown jewel of Sterling Astrogenetics. I walked into the main boardroom, where the European Board of Directors was already seated, waiting anxiously for my arrival. They had watched the international news broadcasts. They knew what had happened in Atlanta, and they knew what kind of ruthless, calculating executive they were dealing with. "Good morning, gentlemen," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. "Let us skip the pleasantries and get straight to business. Thank you so much for watching and supporting this channel. If you have ever had to sever ties with a manipulative parasitic family to protect your own peace and success, please share your powerful story in the comments section below. Stay strong, never let anyone underestimate your worth, and always remember that the best, most devastating revenge is unstoppable, uncompromising success.